Every morning I walked outside, hoping this would be the day my mailbox was still standing. But there it was, again dented, smashed, and hanging by a thread. What Karen didn't know was, the next mailbox I installed wasn't just for mail, it was a trap. Moving into a new home should feel like a fresh beginning, a chance to start over, plant roots, and enjoy peace. That's what I thought. Anyway, I had just purchased a cozy 2-story house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in what looked like a beautiful suburban neighborhood. Everything seemed perfect. The lawns were well kept, the sidewalks clean, and the houses all looked like they were pulled straight out of a real estate commercial. For a single guy like me, working from home and looking for a peaceful environment, this felt like the ideal spot. The first week was smooth. I unpacked, met a couple of friendly neighbors, and even got invited to a small weekend barbecue. It seemed polite, even if a bit reserved. Then I met Karen. She came knocking on my door the third morning after I moved in. I opened the door to find a tall woman in her late 50s, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she had a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello," she said, sharply. "I'm Karen. I'm the HOA president of this community. I just wanted to come by and welcome you and also go over a few neighborhood rules." I raised an eyebrow. Hi, sure, come on in." "Oh no, this won't take long," she said, stepping back and pointing at my front yard. "First off, your porch light is a bit too bright. We like to keep things soft and neutral here. Also, your garbage bin should be brought in by 7 p.m. and I noticed you left yours out until 7:30 last night." I blinked, unsure whether to laugh or take her seriously. "Right, thanks for letting me know." And lastly, she added, flipping a page on her clipboard, "Your mailbox is a bit modern. We prefer something a little more traditional. White or beige usually works. Yours is black and metal, kind of sharp looking. You might want to consider replacing it." I looked over at my mailbox, sleek, simple, matte black with clean lines. It was the same one I had at my last home, and I liked it. I didn't see anything in the HOA documents about mailbox color. She paused, lips pursed. "It's more of a guideline, really. We try to keep the neighborhood uniform." I nodded politely, but I had already decided I wasn't replacing it just because one person didn't like it. She left shortly after, but that first meeting stuck with me. Something about her felt controlling. Over the next week I noticed Karen's SUV passing my house multiple times a day. Sometimes she'd stop, pretend to check her phone, and glance toward my yard. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe she just lived nearby. But it didn't take long to confirm that she was watching me. One morning, I stepped out to grab the newspaper and noticed something strange. My mailbox was dented, not crushed or torn apart, just a big, round dent in the side. I walked up to it and inspected the damage. It looked like something had hit it with a decent amount of force. A baseball bat maybe, or someone backing into it. I shrugged it off. Maybe some kids had messed around the night before. It was a Saturday, after all. I straightened it out and moved on. But then it happened again. And again. 3 times in 2 weeks, my mailbox was damaged. The second time, the post had been knocked loose. The third time, the door was hanging off its hinge. I fixed it each time, but it was getting old fast. Still, I didn't have proof of who was doing it. I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't heard anything, and I didn't want to point fingers. Then came the 4th time. It was a Wednesday morning. I had just made coffee when I opened the front door and froze. My mailbox was lying on the ground, completely ripped out of the soil. The post was cracked in half. Someone hadn't just hit it this time. Someone had destroyed it. I walked over, staring in disbelief. I looked up and down the street, but there was no one in sight. That's when I decided something had to be done. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store and bought a small, motion-activated trail camera, the kind hunters use. It was simple, compact, and had night vision. I attached it to a tree in my yard that overlooked the mailbox. It blended in with the bark, nearly invisible. Then I installed a new mailbox, stronger than before, but still just wood and metal. Nothing suspicious. 3 nights later, I got my answer. It was around 2 a.m. when I heard a faint ping from the camera's motion sensor. I checked the footage on my phone the next morning and my jaw hit the floor. The video showed Karen's white SUV pulling up slowly beside my yard. The headlights were off. She stepped out, wearing dark clothes and holding a heavy object, what looked like a small sledgehammer. Without hesitation, she walked over to the mailbox and swung hard. Once, twice, the third hit knocked it over. Then she calmly got back in her car and drove away. I sat there, stunned. I replayed the video over and over. It wasn't blurry. It wasn't questionable. It was clear, unmistakable footage of Karen smashing my mailbox. And not out of anger. It looked cold. Planned, like it was just something she did. I didn't know whether to be angry or disturbed. Why would she go to this level over a mailbox? What kind of person does that? I called the police and filed a report. They took a copy of the footage but said that unless I had a clearer view of her face or a witness, it might be hard to prosecute. Apparently, surveillance footage from a single angle could be questioned. I was furious, not just because my property was being damaged, but because she was getting away with it, and she knew it. I thought about confronting her, but I knew how that would go. She'd deny it, maybe even twist it around and accuse me of violating some rule. People like Karen didn't admit guilt, they deflected and controlled. But I wasn't giving up. That night, I walked back and forth across my lawn, thinking. Then an idea began to form. If she wanted to keep targeting my mailbox, let her, but next time it wouldn't be so easy. I didn't want revenge, I wanted consequences. If the law needed better proof, I would get it, and while I was at it, I'd make sure she couldn't destroy another mailbox again. That's when I started designing the ultimate mailbox. Not just something durable, but something unbreakable. Steel posts, cement foundation, and multiple layers of protection disguised under a normal-looking exterior. Something that would look harmless until someone tried to mess with it. A mailbox that could take a hit from a car and not budge. And all while I added more cameras, high angles, hidden lenses, motion-activated alerts sent straight to my phone. Karen had made a mistake thinking I'd just keep taking it. What she didn't know was that her little war on my mailbox had just become a trap she wouldn't see coming. Building a mailbox shouldn't feel like preparing for battle, but that's exactly what it became. After watching Karen destroy the last one with her own hands on camera, no less, I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going on the offensive, quietly, carefully, but with purpose. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was setting the bait. First, I needed the materials. A regular post from the hardware store wouldn't cut it, so I drove an hour out of town to a scrap metal yard one, new from years ago. They had thick steel beams, heavy-duty weld plates, and more than enough scrap to get creative. I bought a hollow steel post almost 5 inches thick, way more than needed for holding up a mailbox, but that was the point. Then I found an old fire hydrant base plate, round, solid, with anchor holes. It gave me an idea. Back home, I spent the entire weekend in my garage cutting, welding, reinforcing. My plan was simple: disguise a fortress as a mailbox. I built a steel core, welded it into a box frame, and then surrounded the outside with lightweight aluminum to make it look just like my old one. From the road, it looked perfectly normal. But underneath, it was tougher than a street sign pole in a hurricane. The post itself was welded to the fire hydrant plate, which I anchored into a deep concrete base in my yard, 3 feet down and wide enough to support a lamppost. By Sunday night, the mailbox stood tall again, just a few inches from the curb. My hands were sore, my clothes smelled like welding fumes, but I couldn't stop grinning. If Karen decided to attack it again, she was in for the surprise of her life. I wasn't out to hurt anyone, but I was done being the victim. This was defense with teeth, but a mailbox wasn't enough. I needed better eyes. The trail camera I'd used before was decent, but it only captured from one direction. This time, I went all out. I ordered 2 more motion-triggered cameras and got permission from my next-door neighbor, Tom, to mount one on his porch. Tom was in his 70s, a kind old man who liked gardening and feeding birds, and he was no fan of Karen either. He told me she once fined him for planting tulips too close to the sidewalk. Tom laughed when I told him what I was doing. About time someone stood up to her, he said, shaking his head. She acts like she owns this place. The second new camera I mounted on a nearby utility pole. It was tiny but had a wide-angle lens and recorded in full color even at night. Between all 3, I had complete coverage of the street, the yard, and the curb. Nothing would happen without being caught. Now I waited. The first few nights passed quietly. No alerts, no movement near the mailbox. I didn't even see Karen driving past anymore. It was almost disappointing, like she had finally given up, but something told me she hadn't. People like Karen didn't back down. They got SNEAKIER. Then on the 4th night, the alert came. It was 2:13 a.m. when my phone buzzed. The camera app lit up with a real-time view of my yard. At first it looked empty. Then I saw the Shape Current's SUV crawling along the street with the headlights off. It parked 2 houses down. She got out slowly, holding something in her hand. Not a crowbar this time, something bulkier, a sledgehammer. My heart thudded. She was going to try again. She crept toward the mailbox, crouching slightly as if that made her invisible. I stayed still, watching from my dark bedroom. She didn't even glance around this time, like she thought she was invisible, above consequences. She raised the hammer high and swung it down with full force. Clang. She recoiled instantly, gripping her wrist and stumbling backward. I could almost hear the pain through the video. She tried again. The sledgehammer bounced back, and she dropped it this time, clutching her arm and gasping. She looked around nervously now, clearly realizing something wasn't right. She backed away, limping toward her car. That's when the second camera caught her full face, lit up in the glare of a streetlight. Her expression wasn't angry this time, it was fear. She drove off fast, no hesitation, just panic. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Not because I was scared, but because I was wired at Cotta. This time it was undeniable. 3 angles, clear face, full license plate. Even the weapon she used was visible. I had everything. I could already imagine the look on her face when the police came knocking. The next morning, I went straight to the station. The officer who took my report before recognized me. This time, I handed him a flash drive with the footage and showed him the clips directly on my phone. He watched in silence, nodding slowly as Karen's figure appeared in each angle, smashing the mailbox like it owed her money. "This is enough," he said finally. "We'll take it from here." By that afternoon, Karen had been served with a notice. A court summons followed. She was officially charged with property damage and trespassing, and it didn't stop there. I also sent copies of the footage to the HOA board. Unlike Karen, they didn't have power trips. They were just residents who rotated responsibility every year, and they were shocked. A few even emailed me personally to apologize for what I had been through. The next HOA meeting was wild. Karen showed up, stiff and silent, with a lawyer by her side, but her reputation was already in pieces. One neighbor after another stood up and told their own stories. The flower pot fines, the lawn measuring tape, the time she scolded a child for using chalk on a driveway. It was a parade of frustration, all aimed at the same target. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all HOA duties. She could still live in the neighborhood, but she had no more say in anything. Her clipboard days were over. That night, I sat on my porch for the first time in weeks with a beer in hand, watching the sunset. The mailbox stood strong at the curb, perfectly untouched. A couple of neighbors walked by and gave me knowing nods. Tom even brought over a slice of pie as a thank you. I felt something I hadn't felt since moving in. Relief. But more than that, I felt proud, not because I got revenge, but because I stood up for myself. I used patience, planning, and a little creativity to stop someone who thought they could walk all over people. Karen underestimated me. She thought I'd give up like everyone else, but she learned something important about me. I don't break that easily, and neither does my mailbox. The days following Karen's fall from HOA power were peaceful, for the most part. The silence was a strange but welcome change. No more early morning visits, no passive-aggressive notes on my door, no surveillance from her SUV slowly creeping past my home. It felt like the neighborhood had collectively exhaled. The mailbox stood strong and untouched. Each morning I'd step outside with a cup of coffee and give it a small pat, like a battle-tested comrade who had survived the storm with me. I even added a small sticker on the side, nothing big, just a tiny Iron Man decal. It made a few neighbors chuckle, and even Tom said it gave the box personality. For a few days, it seemed like the battle was over. But peace in neighborhoods like ours is always temporary, especially when someone like Karen is involved. She didn't just disappear quietly. People like her never do. It began with whispers. Tom stopped by one morning while I was pulling weeds from my front flower bed. He looked unusually serious, holding his gardening gloves in one hand and his hat in the other. "She's not done," he said, looking around before lowering his voice. "Karen's been going door to door again. Not officially, of course, just checking in with neighbors, talking about safety, claiming that the neighborhood is changing in a concerning direction." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean because she got caught committing a crime?" "She's spinning it," Tom said, sighing, "telling people your mailbox is dangerous, that it's a hazard to children or could hurt someone. She's saying the HOA didn't follow proper protocol when they voted her out. She's planning something." I laughed at first. It sounded ridiculous. The same woman who had been caught on camera twice committing property damage was now claiming I was the problem. But as the days passed, I started noticing small signs that Tom had been right. A few neighbors who had previously waved now barely made eye contact. One woman who had offered me cookies after I moved in crossed the street when walking her dog past my house. A couple of others avoided walking near my yard altogether, choosing to take the long way around the cul-de-sac. It was subtle but real. I even received a letter, not an official one from the HOAs, were electronic, but a handwritten note slipped into my mailbox. It was anonymous, but the handwriting was unmistakably neat and dramatic. It said, "You've brought trouble into our community. Your hostile behavior and unsafe installations are not welcome. You should consider relocating." I read it twice. Then I laughed and crumpled it up. She was trying to intimidate me the only way she had left: whispers, rumors, and fear. I wasn't going anywhere. Still, something about the situation bugged me. Karen had lost her official power, yes, but her influence hadn't completely disappeared. That kind of person doesn't care about being right. They care about being in control. So if she couldn't come at me directly, she'd find another way, and she did. A week later, a new man appeared at my doorstep, middle-aged, business casual, clipboard in hand. He had a polite smile but an uptight energy I recognized immediately. "Hello, I'm Mark Withers," he said, offering a handshake. "I'm with County Code Compliance. We've received a complaint about an unpermitted structure on your property." I raised an eyebrow. "Structure, you mean the mailbox?" He nodded, flipping through his papers. "That's correct. The complaint states that the installation includes reinforced materials that could pose a safety hazard and may violate setback regulations." Now I understood. Karen had escalated things beyond the HOA. She'd gone to the county. I led him to the mailbox. Mark walked around it, measuring with a laser tool and taking notes. I stayed quiet, watching him work. After a few minutes he looked back at me. "It's very sturdy," he admitted, almost impressed. "But from what I can see, it doesn't violate any height or setback rules. As for the materials, it's not illegal to use reinforced steel, though it is uncommon for residential mailboxes. Uncommon, I said, smirking, not illegal. He nodded again. Correct. As long as it doesn't pose a direct threat or obstruction, it's within your rights. I'll close the complaint. I thanked him, and he left, but I was no longer amused. Karen had moved from petty vandalism to legal harassment. That wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous. She was the type of person who would drag this out for months just to try and make a point. So I decided to go on the record that weekend. I hosted a small neighborhood gathering. I invited everyone on the block, including those who'd recently gone quiet. I offered lemonade, snacks, and good conversation. A few were hesitant to show up at first, but curiosity always wins. Tom helped me set up, and when the crowd was comfortable, I spoke up. I just want to say thank you for coming. I know things have been tense lately, I said, holding my glass up. I want to clear the air. Then I played the security footage. Not all of it, just enough. The clearest clips: Karen swinging a hammer at my mailbox, her SUV parked with the lights off, her face in full view. I explained how I had reported her, how she was charged, and how she had since tried to manipulate the neighborhood through fear and gossip. She told you I was dangerous, I said calmly, that my mailbox was a hazard, but the only one who's ever been hurt here is the one who brought violence. It was silent at first. Then a couple of people nodded. A few looked guilty. One woman, Martha, I think, came over and apologized for avoiding me. She said Karen had made her feel nervous, like she'd be targeted next if she didn't agree. One by one, neighbors began speaking up, not just about Karen, but about how the HOA had always felt more like a threat than a service. Rules were fine, but weaponized rules. That wasn't community. That was control. That by the end of the night, I felt like I had turned a corner. The divide Karen had tried to create was cracking. The truth had power, but only if it was seen, and I had made sure everyone saw it. 2 days later, I saw a moving truck parked outside Karen's house. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just stood quietly at the edge of my lawn, watching her supervise boxes being loaded into the truck. She wore a large sun hat and never looked in my direction. Whether she was being pushed out or leaving by choice, I didn't know, and I didn't care. What I did know was that the nightmare was over. My home felt like mine again. My mailbox stood strong, untouched, and for the first time since I moved in, I felt like I truly belonged. Peace, it turns out, sometimes comes in the shape of steel, concrete, and a little bit of patience. Karen was gone. I didn't want to believe it at first. Even after the moving truck disappeared down the street, part of me expected her to come back. Maybe she'd forgotten a box. Maybe she'd try to leave one final note in my mailbox, her last act of war. But days passed, then a week. The sun rose every morning, birds chirped, neighbors smiled again, and my mailbox stood untouched like a soldier still standing after the battle. Her house sat quietly now. The windows were dark, curtains drawn, no car in the driveway, no more SUV creeping past my place like a shark circling the water. It was surreal. For the first time since I moved into the neighborhood, I felt like I could fully breathe. But oddly enough, that peace didn't come with celebration. I thought I'd feel triumphant when she left, like I'd won, but I didn't. What I felt was something more like closure, like I had finally shut a door that was never meant to stay open in the first place. Still, Karen's damage had lasted longer than she had. Even after she was gone, her influence lingered. There were still neighbors who walked on eggshells, still gossip whispered in quiet tones, still some who remembered her threats and wondered if they'd be next. I couldn't blame them. One person with power, even fake power, can shake a whole community when no one stands up. That was the biggest lesson I'd learned. Karen didn't do what she did because she was unstoppable. She did it because nobody stopped her. Until I did. Tom and I talked about it a lot over coffee. His garden, now thriving with color again, had become our unofficial meeting spot. He'd set up 2 lawn chairs next to his tomato plants, and every evening we'd sit, sip iced tea, and talk about how the neighborhood was slowly recovering. "You've changed things," he said one night, handing me a glass. "I just protected my mailbox," I replied with a small laugh. "No," he said firmly, "you protected your home. And you showed the rest of us that we could too." It stuck with me. Not because I thought I was some kind of hero, but because it reminded me of why I'd moved here in the first place. I wanted peace. I wanted normal. A place where I could focus on my work, enjoy a good cup of coffee on the porch, maybe have a few laughs with neighbors. Karen tried to take that from me, and from everyone else too. Now it was time to fix what she'd broken. The next HOA meeting was coming up in a few weeks. Without Karen, the board was left with 3 volunteers, 2 older women and a retired firefighter named Dave. Good people, but not ones who liked making waves. The community needed someone willing to speak up, so I submitted my name. That it surprised a few people. Even more when I showed up to the meeting wearing a clean button-down shirt and a calm smile. I wasn't there to cause chaos. I wasn't there to brag about what happened. I was there to rebuild. The room was quiet when I stood up. Some looked nervous, some curious, but all of them listened. "I know I'm the guy with the famous mailbox," I began, and a few people chuckled. "But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here because I think it's time this HOA worked with the neighborhood, not against it." I paused, looking around. We've all been tiptoeing for too long, afraid to plant the wrong flowers. We're afraid to hang the wrong curtain color, afraid that if we speak out, we'll be next. But this isn't a dictatorship. It's a community. It should feel like home, and we get to decide what that means, not just one person. I talked about fair rules, about transparency, about how the HOA should help, not harass. I talked about neighbors supporting each other, not spying on each other. When I finished, the room was silent for a second. Then came the applause. It wasn't thunderous, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. That night I was voted onto the HOA board. It felt strange. After everything Karen had done under the HOA name, I was now part of it. But this was the whole point, changing it from the inside. Our first move was simple but powerful. We rewrote the bylaws to include a new policy. No enforcement could be made without a majority vote from the board, and anonymous complaints were no longer valid unless backed by evidence. It was the end of weaponized gossip, the end of clipboard terror. But the best part, we made mailbox reinforcement officially allowed. Yes, officially. As long as it was installed safely and didn't obstruct the sidewalk, homeowners could use any materials they wanted: metal, concrete, brick, steel. The Karen rule, some neighbors called it. I didn't mind. That rule had been earned. And then came something I never expected. A letter, not from Karen, from her son. I found it in my mailbox one afternoon, tucked neatly inside a plain white envelope. No return address. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. The note inside was short, handwritten in neat, masculine script. "Hi, I'm David, Karen's son. I know about everything that happened. I'm not here to defend her, just to say I'm sorry. She wasn't always like this. After Dad died, she changed. Grief turned into control. I tried to get her to step back, but she wouldn't listen. Moving away was her idea. She said that neighborhood hated her now. Maybe they did. I hope you're okay. And thanks for doing what no one else could." David, I read it twice, then once more. And then I folded it and placed it in my desk drawer, unsure what to do with it. I didn't hate Karen. Not anymore. I was angry with her. Sure. But after everything, I realized something deeper. People like her don't wake up one day as tyrants. They fall slowly into pain, into control, into fear. Her war on mailboxes wasn't about paint or placement. It was about power, about holding on to something when everything else had slipped away. That didn't make it right, but it made it human. Later that night, I sat on my porch again. The sun dipped below the roofs, casting golden light across the street. Kids rode their bikes freely now. Chalk drawings filled the sidewalks again, and laughter returned to the air. Tom strolled by, giving me a nod. The mailbox still standing. I grinned, stronger than ever. We laughed, and I realized this was the community I'd wanted all along. Not perfect, but real. A place where neighbors had each other's backs, where problems could be solved without fear, where one voice didn't control the many. And all it took was one unbreakable mailbox. It had been 3 months since Karen left the neighborhood. Her house was still empty, though a real estate sign finally appeared out front with a for sale sticker slapped across it in bold red. A few curious buyers had come and gone, but none made an offer. The place still carried the weight of her reputation, like her energy hadn't quite left the walls yet. Meanwhile, our neighborhood had transformed. The HOA had become something real again, something good. We held monthly meetings in the community center, and they were no longer stiff or awkward. People actually showed up, spoke up, and participated. The clipboard fear was gone, replaced by coffee, donuts, and real conversation. The Karen rule we'd voted in, requiring board approval and evidence for all complaints, had brought immediate relief. No more anonymous letters, no more surprise citations, no more rumors twisted into warnings. In fact, since her departure, complaints had dropped by nearly 80%. My mailbox had become a bit of a neighborhood legend. People actually stopped to take pictures with it. Some neighbors joked that it needed a plaque. Others asked for blueprints so they could reinforce their own. I gave them out freely. Why not let Karen's legacy at least serve one useful purpose? And mailboxes for everyone. Despite everything, life had become peaceful. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, I'd catch myself looking toward her old house, not out of fear, just curiosity, like there was still an unfinished thought hovering there, something unsaid, waiting to be acknowledged. That final thought came one sunny afternoon in late spring. I was working in my front yard, planting new flowers along the edge of the walkway, red and yellow begonias, my mom's favorite. I'd just stood up to stretch when I saw a car pulling slowly into Karen's old driveway. It wasn't her SUV. This was something different, an old blue sedan, clean but aged. A man stepped out, mid-30s, neatly dressed in jeans and a gray button-up shirt. He walked slowly, like someone who wasn't sure if they should be here. But he wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at me. It took me a second to recognize him. "David," I called out. He smiled and nodded. You remembered? I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over. We shook hands, and for a moment, neither of us said much. The silence wasn't heavy, just uncertain. I didn't expect to see you again, I admitted. I didn't expect to come back, he replied. But I wanted to. Just once. He looked over at the mailbox and let out a short laugh. It's still standing, barely scratched, I said proudly. A few squirrels have tried their luck, but that's about it. He chuckled again. Then his face softened. I wanted to thank you properly for not just putting a stop. 2 things, but for how you handled it. You didn't turn it into a circus, you just handled it with dignity. I wasn't sure how to respond. I appreciated his words, but they also brought back everything that had happened. The damage, the stress, the fear, the late-night footage of his mother swinging a hammer like a burglar. She caused a lot of harm, I said, keeping my voice calm. I know, he replied quietly, more than you even realize. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. This was for you. She wrote it before she moved, asked me to deliver it one day. I wasn't sure if I would, but I think you deserve to read it. I took the envelope slowly, eyeing the neat cursive handwriting. No name on the front, just the word sorry. David gave me a small nod. I'll leave you to it. I watched him drive away. Then I sat on my porch, turned the envelope over, in my hands, and finally opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 1 page, no fancy words, no excuses. To the man with the unbreakable mailbox, I know what I did. I know you know it too. I can't explain it away. I'm not going to try. You were new, you were different, and I didn't like it. That's on me. I told myself I was protecting the neighborhood. The truth is, I just didn't want to lose control. I didn't see the line until I was miles past it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know you were right to stand up. You were right to stop me, and you did it better than I ever could have imagined. I hope your mailbox never falls. I hope your peace lasts longer than mine did. Karen, I stared at the letter for a long time, not because it fixed anything. It didn't undo what she did, but it meant something, a flicker of humanity in a storm of control and bitterness. Maybe, in her own way, she realized how far she had fallen. Maybe, just maybe, she had grown in the end. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the mailbox. Not to mail it, just to leave it there, in the very thing she had tried so hard to destroy, something that had stood tall, protected its ground, and ultimately outlasted her. That evening, I made tea instead of coffee and sat on the porch watching the sky change colors. A soft breeze carried the smell of the new flowers I'd planted. A boy rode by on his bike waving. A couple walked their dog, hand in hand. Across the street, Tom waved from his garden. The quiet felt earned now, not given, not lucky, earned. The mailbox had stood strong, like always. A little faded from sun, but still unshaken, just like me. The neighborhood had been through a war most would never understand, but the lesson stayed. Stand up when it matters, speak calmly even when others shout, and never underestimate the quiet strength of something or someone that refuses to be broken. Karen may have come and gone, but I was still here at home, and this time, nothing was going to knock me down. Asterisk, if you enjoyed this powerful story, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Bright Reality for more unbelievable true life stories you won't want to miss.